The Galactic Rescue Coalition ship, Meridian's Grace, moved slowly through the dark void of space. This was the Void Sector, a place where most civilizations sent their unwanted people to die. The ship's sensors searched for any signs of life in the cold emptiness. Minho Kim sat at his communication station, watching the screens for any signals. We're the only human on the ship, working alongside aliens from different worlds. His fingers moved across the glowing controls as he listened. To the static of empty space, suddenly, a weak beeping sound came through his headphones. Minho's eyes widened as he saw a faint signal appear on his screen. It was a distress beacon, calling for help from somewhere in the darkness. "Captain, I found something," Minho called out, his voice cutting through the quiet bridge. "There's a distress signal coming from bearing 27 Mark 4. It's about 6,000 kilometers away." Captain Hyunwoo Park walked over to look at the display. He was an older human with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's cruelty. Next to him stood Dr. Zelenara, the ship's medical officer. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like living crystal and eyes that had many sides like a diamond. "What kind of ship is it?" the captain asked. Dr. Zelenara touched her scanner, and her face changed when she saw the results. The life readings show one person, but they're very weak. The ship design matches the Kethmori. The bridge became very quiet. Everyone knew about the Kethmori. They were a race that had been kicked out of the Galactic Union 2 years ago. The government said they were violent and dangerous, people who could not learn to live in peace with others. Engineering Chief Zolter spoke up from his station. He had 4 arms and was working on multiple screens at once. "Helping. A Kethmori could cause problems for us. Everyone knows they can't be trusted. They use tricks and lies to hurt people who try to help them." Dr. Zelenara nodded her crystal head. "It would be a waste of our medical supplies. The Kethmori are known for their violent minds. They cannot be changed or helped. We should leave them and find someone else to save." But while the other officers talked, Minho was already working at his station. His fingers moved quickly across the controls, locking onto the weak signal. He began to set up the rescue procedures without asking permission. Captain Park noticed what Minho was doing. "Officer Kim, what are you planning?" Minho looked up from his controls. His face was calm but determined. "Someone is dying out there." "Sir, they're calling for help. Isn't that enough reason to answer?" The other officers stared at him. They could not understand why he would want to help someone from such a dangerous race. Dr. Zelenara shook her crystal head. "Officer Kim, you don't understand the Kethmori. They are not like other people. They will use your kindness against you. They will hurt you when you try to help them." Zolter's 4 arms stopped working on his controls. The records are very clear. Every time someone has tried to help the Kethmori, they have been attacked or betrayed. It always ends badly. Minho listened to their warnings, but he did not change his mind. "I understand what you're saying. But right now, there's a person in a broken ship who might die if we don't help them. Whatever they might do later doesn't change that fact right now." Captain Park studied his communication officer. Minho was young, but had always been reliable. He was also stubborn when he believed something was right. Captain had seen this quality in him before. "The Kethmori were exiled for good reasons," the captain said slowly. "They refused to follow the peace treaties. They started fights with other species. The Galactic Council voted to remove them from civilized space." "But Sir," Minho replied, "what if the person in that ship had nothing to do with those fights? What if they're just someone who got lost or hurt? We won't know until we help them." Dr. Zelenara made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "This is not logical thinking. You are letting emotions control your judgment. The probability of deception is very high." Minho turned back to his controls and continued preparing the rescue equipment. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm being foolish. But I can't just leave someone to die in space because of what other people from their race might have done." The ship's computer announced that the distress signal was getting weaker. Whoever was in that ship was running out of time. Life. Support systems were failing. Captain Park made his decision. He had been in command for many years and had learned to trust his crew. Minho had never led them wrong before, even when his choices seemed strange to others. "Set course for the distress beacon," the captain ordered. Prepare the medical bay and the rescue equipment. We're going to save whoever is in that ship, Doctor. Zelenara and Zoltar looked surprised, but they began to follow orders. Minho smiled as he guided the ship toward the weak signal in the darkness. As they got closer, they could see the damaged ship floating in space. It was badly hurt, with holes in its metal skin and scorch marks from weapons fire. It looked like it had been through a terrible battle. Whoever is in there, Minho whispered to himself, they've been through something awful, but they're still alive, and that means there's still hope. The airlock made a loud hissing sound as it opened. Minho put on his breathing mask and stepped into the damaged Kethmori ship. The air inside smelled like burned metal and something else he could not name. Emergency lights blinked red in the darkness, casting strange shadows on the walls. The hallways were twisted and broken. Holes had been burned through the metal walls by plasma weapons. Wires hung down from the ceiling like dead snakes. Minho followed his scanner toward the single life sign, stepping carefully over pieces of broken equipment. This way. He called back to the rescue team following him. Dr. Zelenara and 2 medical technicians moved behind him, carrying emergency medical supplies. They found the survivor in what used to be a cargo hold. Someone had built a small shelter, using metal containers and torn fabric. Inside this makeshift home, they found him. The Kethmori was young, maybe in his 20s, if Minho was guessing right. His skin was dark green with scales that caught the light like small mirrors. But what caught Minho's attention were the marks on his skin. They were not random scars from battle. They were careful patterns, like artwork carved into his arms and chest. He's barely alive, Dr. Zelenara said as she ran her medical scanner over him. Severe hunger, infected wounds, and poison in his blood from plasma burns. By all logic, he should have died many days ago. The fact that he's still breathing is remarkable. They carefully moved him to the Meridian's Grace Medical Bay. The alien lay unconscious on the medical bed, his breathing weak and slow. Dr. Zelenara and her team worked quickly to clean his wounds and give him medicine. While the doctors worked, Minho looked around the medical bay. He noticed things the others missed. The patterns on the alien's arms were not just decorations. They were words in an ancient language. Minho had studied many languages during his communication training, and he recognized some of the symbols. Near the alien's hand was a small carved figure. It was worn smooth, like someone had touched it many times over many years. It looked like a small child, maybe a little girl. The alien held it tight, even while unconscious. "What do you think that is?" Minho asked Dr. Zelenara, pointing to the carved figure. The crystal doctor looked at it briefly. Probably a religious symbol or good luck charm. The Kethmori are known for their primitive beliefs. But Minho did not think it looked like a religious symbol. It looked personal, like something very important to the alien. During his free time, Minho came back to the medical bay. He would sit in a chair next to the bed and read reports or work on translating the symbols he had seen on the alien's arms. Sometimes he just sat quietly, making sure the alien was not alone. The other crew members thought this was strange. Chief, Engineer Zoltar stopped by one day and saw Minho sitting there. "Why do you waste your time here?" Zoltar asked, with his forearms crossed. "This creature will probably try to hurt you when he wakes up." "That's what Kethmori do." Minho looked up from his translation work. "Maybe, but right now he's hurt and alone. Someone should stay with him." Dr. Zel_Nara was more direct. "Officer Kim, you're being foolish. Kethmori are masters of psychological tricks. They study their victims and learn how to manipulate their emotions. Your kindness is exactly what he will use against you when he recovers." "I understand your concerns," Minho replied. "But I can't just leave him alone. What if he wakes up scared and confused? What if he needs help and no one is here?" Third day it happened. Minho was sitting in his usual chair, working on translating more of the alien symbols, when he heard a soft sound, looked up to see amber-colored eyes staring at him. The alien was awake. His eyes were the color of golden honey, but they were filled with pain and confusion.
Out!
He looked around the medical bay, trying to understand where he was. When his eyes met Minho's, he seemed surprised. The alien tried to speak, but his voice was very weak. He said something in his own language first, then switched to broken galactic standard, the common language used by most species. Why? He whispered, his voice like dry leaves. Why do you sit here? Minho put down his translation pad and leaned forward. Because I thought you might want someone nearby when you woke up. My name is Minho. What's your name? The alien stared at him. For a long moment, as if he could not believe what he was hearing. You... You stay here for me, but you do not know me. I am Kethmori. I know, Minho said gently. But you're also hurt and far from home. That's enough for me. The alien's eyes filled with something that might have been tears. I am Kavrith, he said slowly. I do not understand your people. Where I come from, strangers do not show kindness to enemies. You're not my enemy, Minho replied. You're just someone who needed help. Kavrith closed his eyes, but Minho could see he was thinking hard about something. The small, carved figure was still in his hand, and his fingers moved over it gently. Oh, this is very strange to me, Kavrith whispered. On my world, we are taught that other species will only help if they want something in return. What do you want from me? Minho smiled. I want you to get better. That's all. Kavrith opened his amber eyes again and stared at Minho with wonder, as if he was seeing something he had never seen before. As the days passed, Kavrith grew stronger. Could sit up in bed and talk for longer periods without getting tired. Minho continued to visit during his free time, and slowly, they began to have real conversations. What Minho learned made him question everything he thought he knew about the Kethmori. You said you don't understand why I help you, Minho said. One evening, as he sat beside Kavrith's bed, but I don't understand something either. The reports say your people are warriors, but those symbols on your arms, they're not battle marks, are they? Kavrith looked down at his scaled arms covered in the intricate patterns. Oh, they are not. These are memory marks. But on my world, we do not keep our history in computers like other races. We keep it in our minds and bodies. What's a keeper of the old stories? What kind of stories? Everything, Kavrith said, his amber eyes growing distant. The songs our mothers sang too? Children, the names of our ancestors. It's a true history of our people. When someone dies, their memories die with them, unless someone else carries them forward. Minho leaned closer. This was nothing like what the official reports said about Kethmori culture. So you're like a living library. Yes, that is a good way to say it. I spent my life learning the old ways, the true stories of what happened to us. Kavrith's voice became sad. But now I am the only one left who knows them all. What do you mean the only one left? Kavrith was quiet for a long time. He held the small carved figure tighter in his hands. The reports your people received. About my kind, they were not true. We were not the aggressors in the war. Minho felt a chill run down his spine. What really happened? 3 years ago, ships came to our worlds. They said they were survey teams from the Galactic Union, looking for new trade opportunities. But they brought mining equipment and armed soldiers. They told us our colonies contained valuable minerals, and that we needed to move to other planets. You refused? Of course we refused. These were our homes. They'd lived there for generations. Our children were born in those soil. Our ancestors were buried there. But more than that, they wanted to move us to industrial worlds where Kethmori cannot survive. Our bodies need the specific atmosphere of our home planets. Minho began to understand. So when you wouldn't leave, they declared us in violation of development agreements we never signed. They said we were being unreasonable and violent. When we tried to protect our settlements, they called it terrorism. Kavrith's voice cracked with emotion. They painted us as monsters who attacked innocent survey teams. But those survey teams were armed mercenaries working for mining corporations. The story that emerged was completely different from the official version. The Kethmori hadn't been violent aggressors. They had been parents and farmers and teachers trying to protect their children from forced relocation that would have killed them. My ship, Kavrith continued, was not fleeing from justice. It carried the last of our cultural archives. All the stories, all the songs, all the history of my people. I was trying to get them to safety before... Before what? held up the small carved figure. His hands were shaking before the final bombardment. They said it was a surgical strike against military targets. But we had no military. We were farmers and craftspeople and storytellers. Targets they hit were schools and homes and markets. Minho felt sick? This belonged to someone you knew. My daughter, Navira. She was only 5 years old. She loved to hear the old stories before bedtime. She would hold this little doll and ask me to tell her about the brave heroes from long ago. Tears ran down Cavris's scaled cheeks. She died with the others when they bombed the Children's Learning Center. They said it was a military command post. Minho stared at the carved figure with new understanding. It wasn't just a toy. It was all that remained of an innocent child killed in a war that should never have happened. Kavreth, I'm so sorry. But if this is true, why doesn't anyone know about it? Why do all the reports say your people started the fighting? Because the corporations that wanted our world's control, the information networks, they made sure only their version of events reached the Galactic Council. Any evidence that contradicted their story was buried or destroyed. Minho thought about this, but surely some independent witnesses. Who would listen to Kethmori testimony? We were already branded as violent liars, and anyone who might have spoken for us. There was silence during the peacekeeping operations. When Minho shared this conversation with the rest of the crew, their reactions were exactly what he expected. Dr. Zelenara shook her crystal head dismissively. This is precisely the kind of elaborate deception I warned you about. He's creating a tragic story to gain your sympathy and manipulate your emotions. Captain Park studied the official reports again. Officer Kim, the documentation is very clear. Multiple independent sources confirm that Kethmori forces fired first on Union ships. The evidence is overwhelming. But Minho had spent years working with communication systems. He knew how information could be controlled and shaped. Sir, what if those sources aren't really independent? What if someone wanted us to see only one side of the story? The captain looked troubled, but he shook his head. That would require a conspiracy involving dozens of agencies and corporations. It's too big to keep secret. Minho looked back toward the medical bay where Kavarth waited alone with his memories of the dead. Maybe, he said quietly. Or maybe, it's too big to ignore. Minho could not stop thinking about what Kavarth had told him. The story of murdered children and destroyed homes felt too real to be a lie. But everyone else on the ship believed the official reports. Minho decided he needed to find the truth for himself. Late at night, when the rest of the crew was sleeping, Minho used his communication clearance to access the archived records. He started with the original incident reports from 3 years ago. At first, everything seemed to match the official story. The Kethmori had attacked first. Multiple sources confirmed it. But as Minho dug deeper, he began to notice strange things. The timestamps on different reports did not match up. One report said an attack happened at 14:30 station time, but another report about the same attack. He said it happened at 16:45, small differences. But they made Minho suspicious. He found communication logs between the survey ships and their headquarters. But when he compared them to the copies stored in different databases, he noticed that parts were missing. Sentences that started in one version were cut off in another. Words had been changed in subtle ways that made the Kethmori sound more threatening. The deeper Minho searched, the more problems he found. Patrol reports from the weeks before the fighting were completely missing from some databases. Medical reports that mentioned civilian casualties had been classified at the highest security levels. Even routine supply manifests had been altered to hide the fact that the survey teams had been carrying military-grade weapons. Minho spent weeks carefully documenting these inconsistencies. He worked slowly and quietly, not wanting anyone to know what he was doing. But he was not as careful as he thought. One morning, Captain Park called him to his private office. The captain looked tired and worried. "Minho, we've received new orders," the captain said, sliding a datapad across his desk. "We're to transfer our Kethmori prisoner to Facility 7 for proper processing and rehabilitation." Minho felt his blood turn cold. He had heard of Facility 7 during his research. It was run by Hegemony Corporate Solutions, the same company that had been involved in the original mining operations on Kethmori worlds. Sir, with respect, that's not a rehabilitation center. It's a black site where inconvenient people disappear. Captain Park raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation, Officer Kim. Do you have evidence to support it? Minho realized he had revealed too much. I've been doing some research into the Kethmori situation. There are inconsistencies in the official records that suggest you've been conducting unauthorized investigations into classified materials? The captain's voice was sharp. Sir, I found evidence that the Kethmori were framed. The attack records have been edited. Timestamps don't match. Critical evidence has been suppressed or destroyed. Captain Park stood up and walked to the window that showed the stars outside. Officer Kim, even if what you're saying is true, what do you expect me to do? Disobey direct orders from Galactic Command? Risk the careers and lives of my entire crew based on the word of someone we have every reason not to trust? I'm asking you to look at the evidence, sir. Really look at it. Captain turned back to face him. And if I do, and if you're right, what then? The orders still stand. Kavroth still gets transferred to Facility 7. The only difference is that we'll all be court-martialed for refusing to follow orders. Minho left the captain's office feeling defeated. He had 24 hours before they reached the transfer point. 24 hours to figure out how to save an innocent being from execution. That evening, Minho visited Kavroth in the medical bay. The Kethmori was sitting up, looking much stronger than when they had first found him. But when Minho told him about the transfer orders, Kavroth just nodded sadly. I expected this, Kavroth said. I knew they would not let me live. I carry too much truth in my memory. I won't let them take you, Minho said quietly. I'll find a way to help you escape. Ain't Kavroth looked surprised? You would risk your life for me? Your career? Your future? Yes, Minho said without hesitation. Because it's the right thing to do. But you will be caught. You will be punished. Your own people will see you as a traitor. Minho thought about this. It was true. If he helped Kavroth escape, he would lose everything. His job, his reputation, probably his freedom. But he also knew he could not live with himself if he let an innocent being die. Maybe, Minho said, but I can't just stand by and watch them murder you for telling the truth. That night, Minho began planning. The transfer was scheduled for 0800 the next morning at Nexus Station. During the confusion of docking procedures, he might be able to create a distraction that would allow Kavroth to slip away. It was not a good plan, but it was the only one he had. Min-Ho was in the cargo bay. He was preparing the equipment he would need when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Chief Engineer Zoltar approaching. You know, Officer Kim, Zoltar said casually. It's funny how certain maintenance logs keep disappearing from our computer system, especially ones that might show someone accessing classified databases without authorization. Minho's heart pounded. He had been caught. But Zoltar surprised him. I've been doing some checking of my own. Your friend Kavroth knows things about archive preservation and cultural history that only come from real academic study, not the kind of knowledge a simple warrior would have. Before Minho could respond, Dr. Zelenara entered the cargo bay. I've finished analyzing the prisoner's injuries, she announced. They're defensive wounds, the kind you get when you're protecting others from plasma fire, not when you're attacking. Captain Park appeared in the doorway. It seems, he said, quietly, that we've all been asking the same questions. The prisoner transfer was supposed to happen at 0800 station time. Minho stood in the cargo bay at 0759, his heart beating fast as he prepared to carry out his desperate plan to help Kavroth escape. But at exactly 0800, something unexpected happened. Captain Park's voice came over the ship's communication system, broadcasting to everyone on Nexus Station and beyond. This is Captain Hyenwoo Park of the Galactic Rescue Coalition vessel, Meridian's Grace. We are now transmitting evidence of war crimes committed against the Kethmori people. This includes falsified records, corporate conspiracy, and genocide.
Minho
Stared in shock as data began flowing from their ship's computers to the galactic network. Everything was there. Kavroth's cultural archives that told the real story of his people. The edited communication logs that had been used to frame them. The missing patrol reports that would have shown the truth, and testimony from each crew, a member who had investigated on their own. Within minutes, Information was spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone could stop it. News networks picked up the story. Dependent journalists began asking questions. Species that had never doubted the official version of events suddenly saw proof that they had been lied to. Dr. Zelenara stood beside Minho, watching the data transmissions. The medical evidence was clear, she said. Kavres's injuries showed he was protecting others, not attacking them. I could not ignore that. Chief Engineer Zoltar nodded his foreheads. The technical knowledge he possessed could only come from genuine scholarly study. He is an academic, not a soldier. Captain Park joined them in the cargo bay. The communication logs were the final proof. Once you know what to look for, the editing is obvious. Someone worked very hard to make the Kethmori look like monsters. Minho felt overwhelmed. Y'all investigated on your own? We're not fools, Officer Kim. The captain said, when a crew member risks everything for what he believes is right, it makes the rest of us examine our own beliefs. But their victory celebration was short-lived. Alarms began blaring throughout Nexus Station. Security ships were approaching. Fast corporate vessels with orders to seize Kavreth and arrest the crew of the Moravian's Grace. They're going to try to silence us, Captain Park said grimly. All ships prepare for. He stopped talking as dozens of other ships began appearing around Nexus Station.
Ow.
Vessels from many different species, all broadcasting the same message. They were there to protect the truth-tellers and would not allow the crew to be harmed. Varek's medical ship took position alongside them. We have reviewed your evidence, came the crystal-clear voice of their captain. The medical data confirms genocide. We stand with you. An Altarian science vessel joined them. The archive data you transmitted contains cultural treasures thought lost forever. This knowledge must be preserved. More ships arrived every hour. Transport vessels carrying journalists who wanted to interview Kavareth. Military ships whose captains refused orders to arrest the crew. Even civilian ships, whose crews simply believed that the truth mattered more than corporate profits. The corporate security forces found themselves outnumbered 100 to 1. They tried to push through the protective fleet, but every time they moved toward the Meridian's Grace, or ships moved to block them. Min, Ho, and Kavrith watched from the observation deck as the standoff continued. The Kethmori looked amazed at the sight of so many different species working together to protect him. I do not understand, Kavrith said quietly. Why do they care what happens to one survivor of a dead race? Because you're not just one survivor. Minho replied, you're proof that we were all lied to. You're proof that innocent people died while we did nothing to help them. Over the following days, more evidence emerged. Other whistleblowers came forward with documents they had hidden. Corporate executives were arrested. Government officials, who had helped cover up the truth, were removed from office. The galaxy learned that the Kethmori had not been violent aggressors, but desperate parents trying to protect their children. The unprovoked attacks had been acts of self-defense against corporate mercenaries. The terrorist strongholds that were bombed had been schools and hospitals. 3 months later, Minho sat in a garden on New Geneva, the administrative capital of the Galactic Union. Around him, Kethmori children played while their parents watched with tears of joy. These were the survivors' refugees who had been hiding in distant colonies, afraid to reveal themselves until the truth came out. Kavrith approached with something in his hands. It was a small, carved figure, identical to the one that had belonged to his daughter. This is for you, Kavrith said, offering the figure to Minho. In our culture, we believe that those who save lives deserve to be remembered. You did not just save me, you saved the memory of all my people. Minho accepted the gift carefully. I didn't do it alone. Everyone helped, but you started it, Kavrith replied. When everyone else saw a lost cause, you saw someone worth saving. That made all the difference. The Galactic Union had officially apologized to the Kethmori people and granted them new worlds to rebuild on. Corporate executives faced trials for their crimes. New laws were passed to prevent this kind of deception from happening again. But for Minho, the real victory was simpler. It was the sound of children laughing as they learned the true stories of their ancestors. It was seeing Kavreth smile as he taught young Kethmori the memory songs that had almost been lost forever. Minho looked at the carved figure in his hands. and thought about how one small act of kindness had changed everything. In a galaxy that had forgotten how to care about individuals, sometimes the most human thing you could do was see past the labels and politics to the person underneath who just needed help. That was enough to change the world.